So what I want to touch on today is the construction of stories. I mean, stories are obviously constructs, I mean, hardly even in fiction, inventions. But what is the relationship to how we use stories in order to capture and convey a sense of self? So that's where I recently was challenged by some of my colleague friends who are more biography researchers, and they asked me that I use the term construction and what that really means. And so that was the beginning, and here's the opportunity now to push this a little further in the last couple of days to help me. What do I mean with construction? And I will use apologies as an example, and there one particular one, and there's a handout where I have a couple of a transcript and a couple of pictures, facial presentations of John Edwards, and his confession, his apology was made on August 8th, 3 years ago. So why apologies? What is interesting? Yeah, apologies are follow-ups to transgressions or wrongdoings, but also most of the times those that have been uncovered. Otherwise they may remain secrets. Now there is some really interesting literature, particularly by sociologists, on the history of confessions since Augustine, how this was the basic means to develop talk about yourself, and that fed self-reflection, and that fed kind of the distinction between the I and the me in the, if modernity ever existed, in the modern self. But apologies are also something that is very mundane, and I will show you in a second. I will try to convince you. They have to do with cultural conventions. So how are apologies turning into good apologies, and which ones are bad or poor? And they obviously have to do with impression management. But I also, and particularly, am interested in what do we do with this kind of work? How do we analyze that? And here is just a piece that I think is very convincing. Two pictures, one from 2004, where New Jersey Governor McGreevey came out and apologized, and so did Governor Spitzer in 2008. And what I find just striking is not only the self-presentation with your partner in blue, but also the type of tie that is. So no, you know, this is not an accident, I think, and it's not a copy either necessarily. You know, there is something here underlying, current to underlying practices. But before I get into apologies, a little bit of theoretical stuff, and I just want to throw this at you, and I will return to it. Basically, the kind of stuff that I would like you to take away, so that you're saying that wasn't only entertaining, and now we are ready for the gala dinner. So, the main message is I would like to download here. My kids tell me that is not a verb. Identity dilemmas. A little bit more. Positioning is the second message, and I'm doing very little about positioning this afternoon. Identity dilemmas, and here is the list of 3 dilemmas, 3 antitheses, possibly even aporias. There's no way out of it. So one is the same difference between self and others, differentiation or integration. Yeah, am I the same as others? Yes. Yeah, we are at least given or growing up in a culture where this is stressed. Boys are the same as girls, poor are the same as rich, etc. But am I the same as you? At one level, yes. At another level, and this is the other side, yeah, we are also instructed that each of us is unique, is very different from the other. So the way, now when it comes to answering the who am I, or better the who are you question in a real dialogical situation, is by navigating this as a dilemma. It's a dilemmatic space. Rather than being the same or being different, this is a way of constructing myself in different situations as same and different in different ways. Yeah? This is not too confusing, but we will show, or I will try to show this with the kind of data that we have at hand here today by Edwards. Now, agency passivity. I think it's better discussed or looked at in terms of direction of fit between person and world, or world and person. Yeah, on the one hand, I am the product of my teachers. I can blame them often. I don't do that anymore. Yeah, I'm the product of my parents, but I'm also the product of growing up at a particular time, in a particular nation, etc., etc. School, the languages I learned or didn't learn, etc. So there is a direction of fit from world to person, where the person is the undergo. At the same time, and in particular Brunner, but constructivists like Piaget also embrace this, the person is making world. And Brunner is one of the main protagonists with this orientation. Now again, I think both are true. Yeah, we have an impact on the world as person, as people, but we are products of world. And again, we will again try to exemplify that with a look at some data, how people do this. It's better looked at as a form of navigation, yeah, in a dilemmatic space. So agency is not anything, even if we call it personal agency, is nothing that we have. You know, and I'm not debating whether it's really anything that we have or not have, but I think it's better looked at, in particular for purposes of analysis, as a dilemmatic space. And the last one, and this is particularly relevant, and this came up this morning in Catherine's presentation, but also in other presentations from day one, from the first keynote, the navigation of constancy and change. This is where narrative kicks in, and is kind of the more privileged, unique kind of discourse. Yeah, I'll get there, differentiate that a little bit more. So let's move in there. So the role of story and storytelling as an interactive, dialogic activity is between self and other. Yeah, this is where self and other are being also differentiated at the level of at the interactive level, at the discourse level, or the level of discourse space. But this is where characters, and you may not, well, we invent characters. I mean, this is obvious in fiction. Yeah, Hansels, Gretels, and witches, they are not born that way, but rather they are invented for particular purposes. And they are positive in relation to one another. And then these characters are navigating past and present, making the story world, and making that story world then usually relevant for the here and now, for the act of speaking. So the accomplishment of putting something in a story framework, as these kids did, no, but I have a story, is partly differentiating characters. Yeah, as I said, witches, Hansels, Gretels, these girls, these three girls we can push in the snow. And they are differentiated and integrated in terms of what conversation analysts call memberships or membership categories. I think this is a good way of looking at it. Then these characters are attributed with agency, yeah, or less agency. And we'll show a little bit how this works. And last but not least, this is done in order to construct a past, making it relevant for the present, the here and now of speaking, and potentially, and this term came up, I think 2 days ago, for anticipations. Future is not a real tense, because there's intentionality and volition involved, so it is different from past and present, but it is something that is relevant for purposes, for the development purpose of future along those lines. This is a way of looking at it, or potentially looking at it in terms of a grounding activity. Yeah. I like to tease that a little bit apart because on the left hand you see something that looks more like two faces, and on the right hand it looks more like a vase. Actually, when it is in color and not bleached out as most of it on the screen, you see it more as a vase. But you can see these other two configurations. Now what is going on, and I'm currently in a debate here between myself or my colleague Sachiko Ide from Japan, who argues that in Eastern cultures, in Asian cultures, people are able to see both at the same time.